police trap exposed. Never say this at traffic stop. Protect your status. The red and blue lights hit the rearview mirror without warning. A routine Tuesday afternoon. A quiet street. And then sirens. The kind of stop that begins like 100 others and ends like none you've seen before. A sharp knock on the driver's side window. A flashlight cutting through the glass. An officer leaning in with questions that sound simple, almost friendly, but carry weight that most immigrants never see coming. This stop didn't spiral over weeks of investigation. It spiraled in under 4 minutes. For minutes that ended a man's visa status. For minutes that triggered a removal order. For minutes that separated a father from his children for the first time in 11 years. One wrong sentence, just one, and you could be on a flight back home before your family even knows what happened. What this driver said crossed a line that immigration enforcement had been watching for. And when that line broke, ICE did not hesitate. They responded with speed, with coordination, and with a level of preparation that made it clear this was not random. Most people panic in this moment. They talk too much. They explain too much. They hand over documents they were never legally required to show. They fall straight into the trap. But today, you're going to do something different. For months now, there had been signals, not from official press briefings, not from formal policy announcements, just signals, that local law enforcement and federal immigration agencies were preparing something that many in the immigrant community had not seen before. A new kind of collaboration. Quiet, coordinated, strategic. ICE has always been aggressive, yes, but also methodical in that approach. Their operations follow a pattern, a build-up, a silence, and then a surge. But what began raising concern in legal advocacy communities this year was that the pattern suddenly went quiet in a way that felt different. Immigration attorneys who monitor enforcement trends recognized the indicators. The sudden increase in detainer requests sent to local jails. The shift in how traffic enforcement data was being shared between jurisdictions. The quiet rollout of new information sharing agreements between local police departments and federal immigration databases. And the sudden silence from enforcement officials who had previously been vocal. When enforcement goes quiet, something loud is coming. Early this year, civil rights organizations and immigration legal networks detected what they described as a significant expansion of what is known as the 287G program, an arrangement that allows local law enforcement officers to perform functions of immigration agents, including activity not seen at this scale in over a decade. These are moves federal immigration authorities only make when signaling something specific. A broadening of interior enforcement. A deliberate use of routine police encounters as entry points into immigration investigation, or a coordinated effort to build removal cases through information gathered at ordinary moments, a broken taillight, a missing registration sticker, a wrong turn. Observers weren't sure which one applied here, or whether all three were happening at the same time. But one thing became clear. The enforcement posture was shifting. And when that happens without public explanation, every immigrant in this country needs to pay attention. The warning that reached immigrant legal communities was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Attorney after attorney, advocate after advocate, described the emerging pattern as dangerous, underreported, and most importantly, preventable, but only if you know what to say and what never to say. And that last part is everything. Because strategy only works when the other side doesn't know you've prepared. When you've done your homework, when you know your rights, when you understand exactly what a traffic stop can and cannot legally become, officers do not hold the advantage. But when you walk into that moment unprepared, when you volunteer information, when you assume cooperation will protect you, the outcome is already written. Here is what enforcement officials confirmed through public records and investigative reporting. Local police in multiple jurisdictions have been launching what are called pretextual stops initiated for minor traffic infractions that are used as a gateway to gather immigration-relevant information. They target drivers. They target passengers. They target individuals connected to communities that have already been flagged in shared enforcement databases. This is not symbolic enforcement. This is a pipeline. A traffic stop becomes a field interrogation. A field interrogation becomes a call to a federal database. A database check reveals a visa status. And a visa status, if it's irregular, expired, or complicated, becomes the basis for a detainer request, a hold, a transfer, and a removal proceeding. That is the trap. And it begins with what you say in the first 60 seconds after that window comes down. So let's walk through exactly what the trap looks like and exactly how you walk away from it intact. The officer approaches. The window is down. The first question is almost always the same. Do you have your license, registration, and insurance? That question is legal. That request is lawful. You comply. You hand over your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and your proof of insurance. That is all you are legally required to provide at a traffic stop in the United States. Your driver's license does not display your immigration status. Your registration does not reveal your visa category. Your insurance card does not trigger a federal database inquiry on its own. So far, you're safe. But then comes the second question. And this is where the trap opens. Where are you headed today? It sounds harmless. Conversational. Like small talk between two people on a Tuesday afternoon. It is not small talk. It is a compliance test. If you answer, you have just demonstrated that you will keep talking, that you are willing to fill silence, that you feel social pressure to respond. And officers trained in this kind of stop know how to build on that. Where are you coming from? Do you live around here? Are you a citizen? That last question is the one that ends careers, separates families, and triggers removals. And here is what most immigrants do not know. You are not legally required to answer that question at a traffic stop. Under the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, you have the right to remain silent. Under decades of federal case law, you are not required to disclose your immigration status to a state or local police officer during a routine traffic stop. You are not required to confirm whether you are a citizen. You are not required to state your country of birth. You are not required to explain your visa category. You are not required to say anything about your immigration history at all. The only thing you are required to do in most states is provide your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. That is the boundary of your legal obligation. Everything beyond that is a choice. And every word you choose to say after that boundary is a potential piece of evidence that can be used in a removal proceeding. So, what do you actually say? If an officer asks where you're going, you don't have to answer. You can say, calmly and without aggression, I prefer not to answer questions. That is not defiance. That is constitutional exercise. If an officer asks whether you're a citizen, you say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. If an officer asks where you were born, you say nothing additional. You can repeat the same phrase. What you do not say under any circumstances is this, I'm not a citizen, but I have a valid visa. I have a green card, but it expired and I'm waiting for renewal. I'm undocumented, but I've lived here for 15 years. I'm waiting for my asylum hearing. Every one of those sentences is a sentence that has been used as the opening line of a removal case. Every one of those sentences volunteers information that no officer was legally entitled to receive. Now let's talk about what happens if an officer pushes harder. Because they will. They are trained to push, trained to use silence as pressure, trained to make you feel like refusing to answer is the same as having something to hide. It is not. I'm going to need you to be honest with me. You say, I am being honest. I choose not to answer questions without an attorney. This will go easier if you just tell me what I want to know. You say, I understand. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I can find out anyway. You say nothing additional. You do not get angry. You do not get sarcastic. You do not raise your voice. You stay calm. You stay steady. You repeat your phrase. Because the moment you get emotional, the moment you start defending yourself, explaining yourself, trying to convince the officer that you're one of the good ones, you have entered the trap. There is one more piece of this that most people miss. What to do if the officer says you're free to go, but then asks one more question as you're driving away. This is a tactic. It's called a consent encounter. Once a traffic stop has formally ended, once you've received your documents back and been told you're free to leave, you are legally no longer detained. And at that point, you have even more freedom to refuse. But many people, relieved that the stop is ending, relax their guard. The officer leans in with a casual smile. Hey, just one more thing. You don't have any immigration papers I should know about, do you? And in that moment of relief, people answer. They say, no, I'm on a student visa. Or, I have a work permit. Or, I'm applying for citizenship. Each of those answers, given after the stop has ended, can still be used. Consent encounters are voluntary, but the information you give during them is real. After a stop ends, you say, I'd like to leave now. And you leave. Let's talk about documents. You should carry a Know Your Rights card. Many immigration legal aid organizations provide them for free. These cards state, in simple language, that you are invoking your right to remain silent and that you do not consent to a search. You can hand this card to an officer instead of speaking. In many jurisdictions, this is a protected way to communicate your rights without appearing uncooperative. You should also carry the phone number of an immigration attorney, not stored in a password-protected app, but written down, accessible, ready. If you are detained, not just stopped, but actually told you cannot leave, you have the right to make a phone call. Use it immediately. Call your attorney. Do not wait. Do not assume the situation will resolve itself. The moment you are told you cannot leave, the traffic stop has become something else. And you need representation in that moment, not 24 hours later. Now, let's address the question many people ask. What if I'm a lawful permanent resident? What if I have a green card? Am I still at risk? Yes, green card holders can be placed in removal proceedings. If your green card has conditions that were never removed, if you have certain criminal convictions, including misdemeanors that many people consider minor, if your status was based on a marriage that has since ended, or if you have traveled internationally in ways that triggered questions about abandonment of residence, a traffic stop conversation can open a door that leads somewhere you are not prepared to go. Do not assume that lawful status is a complete shield. It is a significant protection, but it is not immunity. Know your record. Know your history. Know the conditions of your status. And if you are ever uncertain about how a past event might affect your standing, talk to an attorney before an officer ever asks. What about DACA recipients? DACA status has been in legal uncertainty for years. If you have active DACA, you have a work authorization and deferred action. But deferred action is not a visa. It is not a green card. It is a promise not to deport, a promise that has been challenged in courts repeatedly and remains subject to change. At a traffic stop, a DACA recipient should exercise the same rights as any other non-citizen. Do not volunteer your DACA status. Do not explain your situation. Do not believe that saying I have DACA will resolve a tense moment in your favor. Have your EAD card accessible. Provide it if requested. Say nothing additional. One final scenario. What if you have no documentation at all? What if you are undocumented, no visa, no permit, no pending application? This is the moment that feels the most terrifying. And in this moment, the temptation to talk, to explain, to humanize yourself, to plead is overwhelming. Do not. Silence is not guilt. Silence is not confession. Silence is a constitutional right that belongs to every person on American soil, regardless of status, regardless of paperwork, regardless of history. You say, I am exercising my right to remain silent. I do not consent to any searches. I want to speak to an attorney. You say nothing else. You hand over your license if you have one. In states with sanctuary policies, officers may be restricted from asking about status at all. But your words, your volunteered words, have no such protection. The trap only closes when you help it close. As enforcement operations continue to expand, more stories will emerge of immigrants who lost their status, their freedom, and their families in a moment that began with something as ordinary as a broken taillight. But one thing is already clear. Knowing this does not make you suspicious. It does not make you a criminal. It does not make you disloyal. It makes you smart. It means you understand the system you are living inside. It means you are protecting yourself and the people who depend on you. Share this video with every immigrant family you know. It might save a life. It might save a status. It might keep a family together. Subscribe to Visa Status Radar for more protection. We protect you with real information as the next phase of enforcement unfolds.